Welcome to the Looper Podcast, a show where we make the rounds with interesting golf personalities. Here's your host, Peyton.
All right, hello everyone, and welcome back to the Looper Podcast. As it said in the intro, my name is Peyton. I'm a golf pro from Iowa, and it's been a little while since we've done this show. It's been about a year now, and we've had a lot of different guests on, really interesting people on to interview and talk about the game of golf and kind of their story in the game and how they got to where they are. And that's been a really, really fun thing to do for me, to get to talk to a bunch of different people about the game I love. But one new thing that we're going to try to do here on the show is do some instructional episodes. I've had a lot of students recently talk to me about wanting a little more content, a little more information on how to do different things in the game without having to take a lesson. Lessons are great, and I love giving lessons, and I think that's the best way to improve your game. But there's a lot of ways that you can learn and you can grow. When you're sitting at your desk at work, or when you're driving in your car, or whatever that is. And I think this is what these type of episodes are going to try to provide is some information, maybe some approaches, some different strategies on how you can improve your game in different areas. And so, obviously, as you can see through the title, this episode's going to be on lag punting. This is I chose to do this one first because I just think that lag punting is one of those skills that's incredibly important, but really rarely practiced and used in the correct way, and it can lower your scores incredibly fast. So I want to share some things, some tips that I've learned, some things that I talk to students about how they can improve their lag putting, and why we're going to do that. Why does that matter? Obviously, I think a lot of you who are listening to this know that lag putting matters. You probably wouldn't have started this episode if you didn't believe that lag putting mattered and that you needed to improve it yourself. But there's some really interesting information out there about how lag putting can improve your score and the average golfer's score really quickly. And so lag putting does not have to be this thing that's that people. It doesn't have to be so unattainable and such a very difficult thing for people. It can be very easy. It can be very simple. And I think if you're a great lag putter, the rest of your game is going to be great as well. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. And thanks for joining us today. All right, so the first thing we want to talk about is just what is lag putting. I think most people understand what lag putting is just by the nature of what it's called. But in general, it's the putts that your primary goal is not to make the putt. Obviously, you would want to make the putt if you're, say, 30 feet out. You want to make that putt. You want to do your best to get it as close as possible to give it a chance to go in. But realistically speaking, you're probably not going to make this putt. You want to make sure that you're avoiding a 3-putt. That's how I think about what a lag putt is. And so you want to get it close enough so that your next putt is makeable, and that you have a pretty high degree of confidence that you're going to make that next putt. And in my opinion, this is one of the two ways to avoid or to drop your scores the quickest. The first one is lag putting. The second one, I think we're going to do another episode on later on, is the pitch shot. Those shots that you're not hitting 100%, but you kind of have to take something off of it in order to be successful. And so that's why I decided to do this one first, because I think it's that important. Some real quick statistics about how often we 3-putt and what we're looking at as far as an amateur versus a professional. The PGA Tour average is about 3% 3-putt rate. So 3% of the holes they're 3-putting. So it's really unusual for them to do that. Obviously, the leader on tour is right around just over 1%. That's some of the best putters in the game are 3-putting that little. So if you look at a 1 to 5 handicapper, they're right around just under 10% of the time they're 3-putting. A 6 to 10 handicapper is right around 11, 12-ish% of the time. 11 to 15 handicap is right about 14.5% of the time, and then a 15 handicap and above is just under 20% of the time. So that you can see is just a huge difference between what the tour pros are doing and what the average amateur golfer is doing. And so often we spend so much time on the driving range, pounding drivers, even working on our irons, which I think is very important, and we're going to talk about that in the future as well. But we spend so little time with our lag putting, and it's so obvious how much better the pros are at a skill that should be fairly easy to do. So it's a very simple, non-complex swing compared to the driver of the iron. And so therefore it can be the easiest to improve because, any golfer can make the same motion as the guys on tour. It's a very simple swing. I always say that my 2-year-old, he's taking a club right now and he's putting around in the green in our basement. Anyone can putt the golf ball. And so it just takes a little bit of reframing how you think about lag putting or how you approach lag putting, and just a little more practice to really drop those scores pretty quickly. Some other real quick statistics so we can kind of get moving forward. The average number of 3 putts per round. So the last time we were talking about percentages, now this is 3 putts per round. The tour leader is about 0.2% of the time, or 0.2 3 putts per round, where the tour average is about a half of a 3 putt per round. So they're not even doing a full one every round. And then the 1 to 5 handicap is about 1.5 times per round they're 3 putting. So those are some really good amateur golfers that are still 3 putting, 1 to 2 times a round. 6 to 10 handicap is about 2 times around. 11 to 15 handicap is about 2.5 times around, and then a 15 and up handicap is over 3 times around that they're 3 putting. So you just think about that. If a 15 handicapper shaves off 3 strokes from their game, that's pretty significant, and that's worth looking into. Then if we look at 3 putt percentage from different lengths, so from 20 to 25 feet, a PGA Tour player is going to 3 putt about just over 2% of the time. The average 1 to 5 handicapper will 3 putt from that distance just under 10% of the time, and then the 6 to 10 handicapper about 15% of the time, and then 1 to 15 handicap 16% of the time. And then one more statistics to kind of round this out. 3 putt percentage from over 25 feet away. The PGA Tour average is just under 10%. These are the really long putts, obviously. 1 to 5 handicapper jumps way up to 19, almost 20% of the time. 6 to 10 handicapper is a quarter of the time they're 3 putting, 25% of the time. And then 11 to 15 handicapper is almost 27% of the time. So as you can see, these statistics show that improving in the lag putting area can really drop people's scores pretty dramatically. So that's why this thing is important. That's why I'm starting with this topic, because if you can improve and just stop 3 putting altogether, just think about what your score is going to look like at the end of a round. All right, so now that we've got that out of the way, I want to jump into some things that you can do to improve your lag putting. And the first one I want to start with is to practice ahead of time. And that seems very simple, very obvious that you should practice ahead of time. But every course you're going to play, even from day to day, if you're playing the same course, the green speeds are going to be different. And so there's no way that you can always anticipate the same size of swing for the same length of putt, if that makes sense. So you're gonna face different green speeds. You're gonna face different elevation changes, up or downhill putts, side hill putts, that sort of stuff. But you want to find on the practice green before you play around the longest putt you can find that's fairly flat. Okay, and the reason for that is I want you to set a baseline for the day. I want you to take some putts, not at a hole, because obviously, like we said earlier, lag putting is not about making the putt. It's not necessarily completely about accuracy. It's mostly about speed and distance of the putt. If you can get that correct, you're going to find that the ball lands close to the hole, unless your aiming is just horrendous, which I don't normally see. Even in the higher handicaps, people can generally get the ball moving in the right direction. They just struggle a little bit with the speed. They leave it way short or hit it way long. And so when you're practicing before a round, instead of pounding a bunch of balls, obviously you want to stretch, you want to get your muscles moving so that you can hit some full shots. But you also want to set your baseline of how long a swing on the putts go how far. So if you find a 30-foot putt, say on the putting green, that's fairly flat. And the reason you want it flat is because you don't want your baseline to be something that's downhill or uphill or even side hill. Ideally, it's flat, but obviously a side hill is going to be better than an uphill or a downhill one. But you want to get a feel for how hard you have to hit that day a putt of 30 feet, say, okay? And so you're going to kind of keep an eye on how far you have to swing the putter head back in order to hit it 30 feet, so that when you face a 25-foot putt or a 35-foot putt on the golf course that day, you can remember what your baseline was, how hard you hit a 30-footer flat, and adjust from there. Instead of going in cold and saying, I have no idea how hard I need to hit this, and then guessing every time you step up to the ball. You know that day that, if I have a 30-footer, I have to bring my, maybe my putter head, the face of my putter, to the outside of my back foot. And kind of have a marker in your head of how far that swing is. Since your swing is a pendulum, it ought to go the same distance on both sides of the ball. And so when you have that baseline, that helps you to take it to the golf course and know how to adapt better when you're facing, maybe it's an uphill putt that's a little bit shorter. Maybe it's a downhill putt that's a little bit longer. You can make your adjustments based on your baseline for that day. And so I think that's huge. And that's something that I don't see a lot of amateur golfers doing. A lot of them are trying to hit the driver because that's fun, that's sexy. But the lag putt is not. But if you want to lower your scores, I would recommend getting your baseline set before you go out on the golf course. The second thing that I always recommend to players, and this is something that I don't see a lot of players doing, even after I recommend it to them. And the reason is because they think it takes too much time. And that is, view your putt from the side. Most people, when they approach a lag putt, they get behind the ball so that the ball is between them and the hole, and they judge the speed that way. Well, in general, we have really bad depth perception. Humans do. So don't rely on your ability to guess how far a putt is or how hard to hit it by standing behind the ball. Instead, walk to the side so that you create an equilateral triangle or a 90-degree angle with the ball and the hole. So you have the entire length of the putt in front of you, in front of your face, so you can see the length of the putt. And what I want you to do is take some practice swings while looking at the line from the side. And what that'll allow you to do is get a better sense for how hard you need to hit the ball. You're going to be able to see, is the ball or the hole higher up? Is it uphill or downhill? But you can also judge a little bit easier how far you need to swing that club. And I want you to go to the side of the putt so that you're swinging the same direction the ball is going, okay? So for a right-handed golfer, I want you to stand on the side where the ball is on your right side and the hole is on your left. And for a left-handed golfer, I want you to stand so the ball is on your left and the hole is on your right. Because then you can take some practice swings while staring at the hole and imagining the ball traveling from the ball where it is to the hole. And that gives you a much better feel of how far a putt is than standing behind the ball and judging it that way. Now, like I said, a lot of people, I still, after recommending this, don't see them doing this. And the reason is they think it takes too much time. They got to walk to the side and then walk back. And what I would say to you there, if you're hesitant to do it, if you're in a group that likes to play fast, there's a lot of talk these days about playing fast. We see the guys on tour who play just incredibly slow, and we can't do that on, in the normal day because there's play behind us. We want to respect the people around us, obviously. But 2-putting is going to take a lot less time than 3-putting. So if you accurately judge that first putt, the distance to be correct, then you're going to get it close, you're going to be able to tap it in and move on. But if you don't do that and you leave yourself, 10 to 15 more feet, whether it's short or long, you're going to be spending more time than reading the putt again, hitting the ball again, and then having to tap in again. And, hopefully it's not a 4-putt, but you get my point that you're hitting the ball less, so it's taking less time in the whole scheme of being at the green. So trust that's probably the number one thing on the golf course to do to improve your lag putting. So don't trust your depth perception. Go to the side and see it for yourself. The next thing that I want you to pay attention to is the final third of the putt. So what you can do is actually walk through your putt, not directly on the line, but to the side of it, and get to the final third of it, because that's when the ball is going to be traveling the slowest. It's going to be most affected and influenced by the break. When you first hit a putt, obviously it's going faster. It's not going to bend too much left or right. And I think too much people will sit behind the ball, they'll crouch down to judge where it's going to break, and they spend time trying to figure out, on these lag putts that have 2 and 3 breaks in it, and just they get a little bit of information overload, that they overanalyze what's going on, and they do get the direction wrong. Like I said earlier, that most people can get the general direction right, but if you can pay attention and realize that the first 2/3 of the putt, it's not going to move much. It's going to go pretty straight. It's not till it's dying at the end, closer to the hole, when it's slower, that the slope is going to take it more. And so if you've got a double breaker, feel free to, in general, ignore that first break because it's probably not going to do a whole lot. Obviously, the more extreme ones are going to affect it slightly, but not nearly as much as that final third. All right, so then the final thing that we're going to talk about is the tension in your hands. And I see people err on both sides of the spectrum when it comes to how much tension to have in your hands. I see people on lag putts. It seems like a lot of times people, when they get longer putts, they change how their hands work in the putting swing, in the putting stroke. And one thing they do is, maybe they get a little nervous, not sure what to do, and so they grip tighter. Tighter is going to be a little bit more difficult to control the club face, and you're also probably going to hit it a little bit harder because of the tension in your hands. Now, the other thing is also true on the opposite side, is that people are too loose and too whip-like in their hands, and they get their wrist going too much because they're just trying to hit the ball really hard because it's got to go far. That's an error as well. I want you to feel like you've got a firm grip, but not a tense grip, if that makes sense. Hopefully that does. That you've got control over the club face, but you're not white knuckling it. You're not strangling the club. You've got enough in it enough pressure on your hands in your grip to keep the wrists pretty still, like you would in a normal swing, like you would in a shorter putt, but also that you're not gripping it so hard that influences how you're hitting the ball. I still want you to think of your putt as a pendulum, that you're allowing your shoulders and your arms to rock evenly back and forth. Like I said a little bit earlier, you want that pendulum swing where you've got the same length of swing on both sides of the ball. And unfortunately, for a lot of amateur golfers, that breaks down when it gets to longer putts because they feel like they have to just hit the ball rather than allowing the natural swinging and flowing of a pendulum to strike the golf ball. And so when you're getting up to a putt, that's another thing. When people are uncomfortable anywhere in the golf game, on any swing, when we are uncomfortable, we tend to tense things up way too much. And there's just too much tension a lot of times in people's shoulders for the full swing, and in the hands as well for both putting and the full swing. And so when you recognize that you are uncomfortable or you are not confident with a shot, I want you to eliminate tension as much as possible. Now, like I said, it can also go too far and you can get too loose, and then the club and the hands get too whip-like. I want you right in the middle where you're making sure that your hands are still. They're not strangling the thing, but they're not so loose that you're whipping the club around or the club's moving, especially the club head is not moving around when you're holding the club. So those are kind of the 4 things that I would really recommend you do in order to quickly improve your lag putting and drop your scores really fast. Like I said, first of all, spend time on the practice screen and set your baseline for the day every single time you play, because it's not going to translate over from round to round, course to course, day to day. The next one was viewing the putt from the side so you can get a better feel for how long the putt actually is and how hard you need to hit it. Then pay attention to the final third of the putt when you're looking at the break, when you're trying to figure out where this putt's going to go. And then the last one is get a good grip pressure on there, not too firm, not too loose, and allow that pendulum swing to happen still. Don't let those fundamentals break down when you're transferring into a swing that's a little more uncomfortable, that you're a little more unsure about. All right, so that's all I've got for you today on lag putting. If you've got any questions that you want answered on the podcast, please be sure to shoot me an email at epeyt88@gmail.com. I would love to start answering more questions, doing more episodes like this on instructional topics to help you improve your game and love the game more. So thank you for joining me, and we will talk to you next time.
Thanks for joining us today. Don't forget to subscribe and rate the Looper wherever you get your podcasts. You can also follow the show on Twitter and Instagram @Looper Podcast. Talk to you next time.